siblings of narcissists, psychopaths, or sociopaths. What's your experience? My brother was diagnosed with NPD at 16. He's never had empathy. Children learn empathy at some point, but it was like he never reached that developmental stage. He wasn't concerned when people got hurt. He hit and bullied others in school to get what he wanted. Doctors, therapists, medication. Nothing made a difference, and it's not like there was some kind of trauma or a reason for his behavior. It's like he was just born wrong. When he was 10 he started taking and dealing drugs as a drug runner for some older teens. You can't be prosecuted under 14 in Germany. My parents called our version of CPS for help. He got more therapy, some inpatient stays, and his own social worker. He stole my dad's car when he was 12 and got picked up by the cops. He got his first charges at 14, drugs and assault. My parents were at their wits' end and agreed to have him placed in a group home for troubled teens for a year. He was kicked out shortly before the year was up. He came home and seemed to recognize in a clinical, detached kind of way that he couldn't go on like this without ending up in prison. He was about 15. He started being less violent, but he had insane delusions of grandeur and needed everyone to comply with whatever he wanted. If they didn't, he lashed out. My parents still made him go to therapy. He assaulted my dad and choked him because he didn't want to. My brother was 16, but also 6 feet 3 and about 190 lbs. My dad died from a sudden aneurysm when he was 16, and he went off the rails completely. He got a girl pregnant and she was kicked out by her mom. My mom took her in. The girl was not a bad person, just had some issues, so it wasn't that surprising that she'd date my brother, who could be charming if the situation demanded it. He beat her up at our house a couple months later while she was still pregnant. That was the last straw for my mom. She kicked my brother out. We helped the girl to find an apartment for her and the baby. Unsurprisingly, my mom caved a short while later and let my brother move back in. He seemed to think he was the head of the household. My parents never married, so my father's modest possessions went to me and my brother instead of my mom, and that included the car my dad bought a year before he died. It was the first brand new car he ever bought, a small one, but he was proud of it. My brother made my mom sell it so he could get his half of the money. It wasn't even a faking expensive one, and my mom was devastated to lose my dead dad's little car. I was 20 then, my brother was 17. He was verbally abusive and basically tortured my mom mentally. He threatened to hit me on a daily basis whenever I didn't do something or give him something he wanted. He also threatened to kill me a couple of times. On a particular bad day he told my mom that he'd have no trouble to get a couple guys to run her off the road when she went out. When the threats got stale, he'd beat me up every couple weeks. There was one particular instance where I was actually afraid he was going to kill me. He did his usual spiel of using me as a verbal punching bag because he had a bad day and I was just burnt out. Didn't even react anymore. He hit me a couple of times and choked me. No idea how, but I fought him off, grabbed my phone, and ran to the bathroom where I locked myself in before he could get to me again. He was trying to beat down the door while I called the cops. The cops did nothing. Told me he lived there, so we'd have to get along, and since we both said opposing things, nothing would come of it. I insisted they take my faking statement. My mom wasn't home at the time, but she was a wreck anyway and couldn't deal anymore. A couple days later, my aunt came to visit for a couple of days. My brother was his charming, manipulative self for her. My aunt tried to pressure me into not pressing charges, since apparently I gave myself the dozens of bruises and contusions I had, as my brother had told her. I was severely suicidal at that point and gave my mom an ultimatum, me or him. She kicked him out again. He came back a year later and I moved out for college immediately. I don't blame my mom much anymore. Rock and a hard place and all that, but she never could understand the fact that her love for her son was misplaced. He didn't have the things that made someone human. He had no empathy. He was not capable of love. He was just an empty shell that went through life trying to get whatever pleasures he so desired by whatever means necessary. I haven't spoken to or seen him in about 7 years, but my mom's still in contact with him. He went to Spain when the mother of his daughter tried to get child support. Sometimes, my mom still talks about the things he's done. A couple examples. For some reason, his ex-girlfriend started letting him see his daughter, and she flies to Spain with my mom once or twice a year. Or used to. Anyway, he locked her in the basement with an adult-sized portion of food she threw up on because she couldn't eat anymore. She was 4. Hard to remember. Also, she doesn't want to go visit him anymore. He withheld rent from his Spanish landlord for like 6 months. The landlord had terminal cancer and my brother saw it as a waste to give money to a dying man. He married a girl in Spain and had another kid, and he now makes a living as a realtor. From what I've heard, he still thinks he's God's gift to mankind. I don't think I'd even go to his funeral if he died. My sister has never been diagnosed with narcissism or a personality disorder other than OCD, but when we were younger she often enjoyed telling people, before I met them, that I had a difficult relationship with the truth, so that they wouldn't want to be around me. I had the reputation of a liar and no friends for most of my preteen years, and she was popular in our homeschool group until she left and got into high school. After she left, I still didn't have friends, but neither did she, and she blamed me for it during her frequent temper tantrums. She would throw things, scream, cry, and threaten me with kitchen knives on a pretty regular basis. All of a sudden, the year that I turned 17, and she turned 21, the tantrums stopped, and she got engaged. He moved in with us, the tantrums started again, and for once I wasn't the target. The worst fight there had happened when she caught him looking at a photo of a bikini model, which she considered cheating. She hit him full force with an open palm, and when our mum saw, she threatened to kick her out if she hit him again. They got married, moved out, and divorced within a year of him enlisting in the army. They can make drama out of any situation, and will try to drag you into it even years later. Example, I'm the next to youngest. My whole family is a shit show, but when I was planning my wedding, I was still trying to pretend I had a reasonable family. My future husband's family was like Leave It to Beaver, so I asked both of my sisters to be bridesmaids. I knew this was a risk, but I hoped they could keep their sheets together for a single evening. At the time, I thought they had. About 8 years later, we were in the same city, because one of our brothers was in the hospital due to a bad car accident. We had one hotel room across the street from the hospital, so people could go rest when they needed to. I was in that room with my oldest sister when she said, "You know, middle sister, stole wine glasses from your wedding, right?" I told her I didn't care. A couple of hours later, I was in that room with my middle sister. She said, "You know, older sister, stole glasses from your wedding, right?" I also told her I didn't care. So here we are, waiting to see if our brother was going to die, and both of these bitches are playing reindeer games with me, trying to make me be angry with the other one. Our brother lived. I've cut contact with all my siblings, because they are all like this. They have to start cheat, no matter what the situation or consequences. She called the cops and CPS, repeatedly accusing our stepdad of child abuse. It usually lined up with her having rules and punishments. She didn't like that my parents did research on how to raise a psychopath that doesn't become a murderer. They suddenly knew all her tricks and tactics. I sometimes think about how sad it must be to be physically incapable of feeling human emotions, but it clearly would only hold her back. Edit. Her diagnosis was emerging antisocial personality disorder because they said they couldn't diagnose someone under 25 as a psychopath. Dad acts really similar, so I assume whatever she has, he has that too. To add some more, now that I'm more awake, I lost almost all of my friends. My family, besides my immediate, totally ignore me because me and my mum protected my stepdad by saying my sister was lying about the abuse. Just to be clear, we were investigated multiple times and CPS said they were doing a phenomenal job raising so many kids with so many mental health issues so well. They put down that they were false claims the first 2 times, and after that they were like, "We just have to investigate to be sure, just do the interviews and get it done." We have to do it every time, which I do appreciate the diligence if a child is really being abused, but we had stuff from therapists and counselors that were all like, "Has a history of lying, tells lies to get what she wants, and my entire family still thinks we're protecting a monster. The real kicker is that our biological father is also a psychopath and actually a child abuser. Guess who she moved in with when my aunts refused to let her go back to my mum's? If you guessed our actually abusive dad, who was now basically giving her Psychopath 101 courses just by being near each other, then you're right. All our family who banded together in a fickle justice brigade about child abuse are now BFFs with the guy who used to threaten to break my legs and choke me and hit me when I was 7 or younger. I'm sure it makes my mom feel great too, knowing that all her sisters took her abuser's side after a lengthy divorce battle that he kept coming back with more and more affidavits for and just drained her emotionally and financially for years on end. Point I could write a book about how much they've all hurt me by being or enabling a psychopath. I'm pretty certain that at least some of my aunts are narcissistic. Last week my grandma went on a tirade about me not forgiving, but no one has ever apologized or even acknowledged that they did anything wrong. I won't drug sweep something that still hurts me regularly, and apparently that makes me that problem again. My little brother is a narcissistic, sociopath and psychopath. Point I come from a culture where the family bond is incredibly important, and no matter how bad your family is, always forgive them, protect them, and take care of them. For 25 years we lived through faking hell because of that piece of shit. It really pained me, but I gave up on him years ago. My mother, however, being a Turkish mom, forgave him countless times, but he only got worse. I mean, I knew something was wrong back when we were still kids, but I would still always do my best to be the good brother and role model. I would always protect him and simultaneously get the blame for all his mistakes. My mother was in the hospital giving birth to my oldest sister. We were home alone, and he asked me if he could go out and play in front of our house. We have a great park in front of our home and live in a very green area. I gave him permission only for his friend to come back an hour or two later and tell me that my 11-year-old piece of shit little bro, I was 13, we might have been a bit younger, was arrested for theft. We were a well-off family. He was my mom's sweetheart. He never needed money or needed to steal. He did it just for attention. Just because he was upset our sister might take his place. I had to pick him up, and I remember crying out of shame while this faking cunt had a smile from ear to ear. He didn't give a shit. Police brought us both home. My parents were back from the hospital with my little sister, and the house was filled with friends and acquaintances. I remember feeling so much shame and embarrassment, profusely apologizing to my mom. I felt responsible. As the years passed by, this became worse and worse and worse, and we all basically lived in a constant state of terror and anxiety because of this lousy subhuman piece of shit. I'm too embarrassed to share most other stories, and I rather just not think about them anymore. We've finally cut him out of our life after 25 years. Imagine having to hide all your stuff because your house is never safe. Never being able to ask for anything as a teen, because if I ask for 5 my little brother has to get 50. Imagine having to worry if you can leave because this little terrorist cunt might threaten your mother and steal her stuff or take her money. For a while he had a really pretty girlfriend. My mom hoped this would help him normalize, and he treated her like she was his property. This one time he was yelling and threatening her, dragging her off the stairs. I heard the commotion, and when I saw it, I rushed to them, slapped him on the face, and put him in a chokehold. Told him if I ever heard him behave like that I'd break his legs. This allowed this poor girl to run off and get out of our house with my little brother yelling how he would end her. He later explained to me how he got angry because she talked back and wouldn't lend him money. At this point he spends 1,500 euros a night in clubs. When she finally dumped this piece of shit, he called her dad to tell him his daughter was a filthy slut and sent him pictures of her underwear etc. He then became incredibly depressed, not because he loved her. He always talked about breaking up with her and how she bored him etc. but because she was his property and how dares she leave him. He owned her. He then took my parents' new car and smashed it into a wall for attention. Just fast enough that it totaled the car, but also slow enough that he came out of the car without a scratch. I mean, he had his own car, new BMW, that he also got by manipulating my mom. But he didn't use that. He used my parents' car. He claimed his car had no gas. I checked it, and it was faking full. He then emotionally manipulated my mom about how he was suicidal, blaming us for not being more supportive. He used this for months as an excuse for his shitty behavior, and intensified daily. The only person he actually feared was me, so I felt this incredible faking burden on me to try and keep him in check. I couldn't leave him alone with my mom. I couldn't move out, because I was worried sick he might kill her one day. I tried to talk with him, but no amount of talking etc. worked. He made 1,000 promises, then came up with some lame excuse about how 19 years ago I once hit him, so this was all my fault. I faking hit him because he was about to smash this kid's face in with a faking rock. Or how he was once grounded and had to stay in his room for 2 days, so he was psychologically scared. I mean, I beat up at least 50 kids for this piece of shit. He'd always intentionally pick a fight with older, bigger kids and use my name to get out of trouble. Anyway, I can go on for faking ever. And these are literally just the tame things I mentioned. My little brother was evil incarnate. It took years to finally break all contact. Because ESP, my mom always hoped he'd get better, and she even excused his threats and theft, even though he could just ask. He liked stealing our stuff despite the fact that we'd have given it to him if he asked. He'd take money from our pockets, valuables for my rooms, etc. I couldn't go to the bathroom without locking my door, but we finally no longer have contact. It's like this burden is lifted off my shoulders. I no longer have to worry he's threatening, stealing, or pressuring my mom, abusing her trust etc. The anxiety and terror we all felt on a daily faking basis literally ruined our life. He literally made my mother sick. She was the strongest woman I knew, and this piece of shit destroyed her bit by bit. He ruined over 20 years of my life, and I will never forgive him for what he did. I do no longer consider him my brother, family, or even an acquaintance, and in all honesty I won't even go to his faking funeral, and don't want him to come to mine. Fuck him. P.S. This is why I believe some people are born evil. This piece of shit had an incredibly loving and supportive family that gave him all the attention he needed or wanted. But it was never enough. It was like absolutely no one, except he was real. None of us mattered. He treated his friends, girls etc. all the same way. This was made worse with how social and manipulative he was. Everyone that met him thought he was great and funny until he took their money etc. And one day he just switched and threatened them, spread lies about them etc. and did absolutely everything to ruin them. He would never ever forgive anything, and was so stubborn that he would cut his own arm just so he could get back at someone or get his revenge. Even though he was always the wrong party, he made up this delusional stories in his head that made him the one that was the victim. I mean, my mother once refused to give him money because he had stolen 500 euros from her. He was like 15. So he went into her room, and when he couldn't find money he took a scissor and cut up all her clothes and shoes, then took all the sauces we had at home and squeezed the mayo, ketchup, BBQ sauce and anything else you can imagine on the clothes he cut, all over her floors and carpet and her bed. Even years later this piece of shit used that as an example of my mom being a bad mom, or treating him wrong, saying my little sister got pocket money, but she couldn't spare to give him some money. He blamed her and my mom to my faking frustration for years like an idiot. I love her, but this is the one thing I absolutely resent. Apologized to him saying she should have just given him the money. When I hot angry about this and explained to my mom she shouldn't ever apologize to him because in his head it legitimizes his behavior. She simply says she doesn't want to cause any drama and problems in the house. She was faking scared. The problem is the more she did it the worse it got. Something she now finally realizes. Fuck man, I just keep ranting and I can go on forever. I'm going to stop now. Literally made myself depressed thinking back. Anyway, fuck him. We're all happier than we've ever been now that we are rid of this piece of shit. My dad is as much of a narcissist as it gets. I didn't realize that it was abnormal until I moved out of the house and out of state. When I finally came back I remember him calling me one day to tell me to give him $10 because he claimed he need to grab something to eat. Sorry, but I don't have $10 to give you. You don't have $10 to give your dad. Come on, I'll pay you right back. I just need it to go down to the store so I can eat. I don't have it, so you'll have to put on your big boy pants and make some money for yourself. Well, I was gonna ask your sister, but I don't wanna ask her, because she's my daughter. Yeah, no. I hung up after that. A few minutes later he calls me and says, hey, your sister just sent me the $10. See, it wasn't that hard. A couple months later I heard that he was still asking my sister for money, and then on my sister and my brother-in-law's anniversary he called and basically blew her up over the phone when she said no, to the point where she was crying on that day of all days. And then he finally said, so you're just gonna let your dad freeze to death outside tonight? My brother-in-law told him not to ever call him again, and I haven't heard from him since. He honestly thinks he is super popular and a good person, but he isn't. I blocked his number and want nothing to do with him anymore. Back to the question though, it's really weird because you end up growing to either be just like them or completely the opposite. I've had to grow up on my own and not be able to have a father figure to show me how to be a man and make smart decisions, or how to be a leader of a household. These are things that I think many people take for granted and don't fully realize how great they have it by having both parents in the house and have them not be completely focused on themselves. I always envy the people that still get to live with their parents into their 20s. I moved out when I was 18 and I'm almost 30 now, and I wish every day that I had the ability to still live at home and not have to worry about rent, utilities, car payments, insurance, gas, phone, internet, etc. 2-year divorce/custody battle. I was a faithful, happy, and devoted husband and father. Gave up my music and my small business to stay home with our child by her request. She displayed great emotional and mental abuse and instability prior our child's birth, was prescribed meds which helped greatly, but went off when our child was conceived and never went back on. My goal was to protect him as much as possible. She got worse and worse again. She started a relationship and affair with another co-worker, someone she hired, and hatched a plan to destroy me. Had me arrested, kicked out, left me with no money, job, vehicle, home, and told the court I was an abuser, neglectful of our child, an alcoholic, stolen wasted family funds, etc, etc, etc. Without the court's involvement she had his education and medical block me. I have access now. Son developed bad asthma and she hid it. He was prescribed 2 inhalers and only gave me 1. When I tried to get in touch with his education and medical she claims I'm harassing them and causing problems. I went through 4 months supervised visitation for 1 hour a week, 2 CPS investigations. No case was ever opened. I have my son overnights on a more regular schedule now. She still won't settle and still wants sole custody. She took out a $120k loan out on our app 2 years ago without my approval or court's knowledge, and they put it in equity. I brought in a forensic psyche who arrested us and said that my test showed I was too well adjusted and therefore I must be in denial, and hers said she is prone to persecutory behavior and ideas and histrionics. I've done nothing but complied with everything, given her every olive branch, and all she does is take and accuse. She told the forensic we had a nanny, no proof and no we didn't, and that I'd plead guilty to the charges. I didn't and they were dropped by the court. She told the doctor our child's preschool couldn't hold or administer his medication, but I have a recording of them saying they could undo. Narcissistic personality disorder. A really good friend of mine was married to a narcissist. We met when all 4 of us were in grad school and were both newly married. The international student community is pretty small, particularly at the graduate level, and I soon noticed that he would screw over or take advantage of pretty much anyone. Note to self: one time we were cycling and I had a really bad crash. He basically left me and didn't even tell my wife. I got home like 4 hours later, carrying my broken bike all bloody and dirty. We all finished our schooling and started families. We occasionally noticed signs of abuse, sometimes bruises, but since we were all really into cycling and rock climbing, bruises were not uncommon. She was a pretty confident woman, but she would physically cower if he got angry. Also, even though they both earned really good money, he would steal stuff, like a water bottle, or climbing gear or anything left unattended. One time we were going to a really fancy party, and she bought a new dress. He insisted that she keep the tag on it and return it after the party. Lots of really ugly stuff happened, but basically, near the end of their marriage he was trying to bully her into accepting that he could have multiple girlfriends. But he didn't want an open marriage. He was insanely jealous of any male friend of hers. At one point he dug 3 pits in the backyard of their home and told her they were for her and each of the kids. Divorce followed. She is so much better off. Their kids have also broken contact with him. So late to this, my sister is narcissistic, but also hits points for borderline and historic personal disorder. I prefer to say that she is just a dick. She conducted a lot of her abuse under my parents' noses. She got me alone, made horrifying comments. The earliest I remember was that she would strip me naked and tie me to a lamppost. I was about 6. She was 13. Berate me. This lasted well into her 20s. Sulked and conducted the silent treatment. She used to phone me up in my first year of university to berate me because she had a bad day at work. I have a lot of her behavior on Just No Family. My favorite is when she told me that it is harder to be the loved one of someone who has an eating disorder than to have an eating disorder. She was banned from family therapy when I was in hospital for my eating disorder. She was led to believe that it was because she lived far away. In reality, it was because the 2 trained therapists said she couldn't take part anymore because she used previous sessions to berate and abuse me. She came to visit me in hospital. She was overheard by 2 patients and kitchen staff lecturing me on the fact that because I had an eating disorder, she wasn't going to have children. This went on for an hour. They reported her to the psychiatric team. She is now, unsurprisingly, a mother. She threatened to self-harm because there was a miscommunication over what my parents would give her boyfriend, now husband, for Christmas. There is so much more, but I choose to laugh at her now. I see how pathetic her attempts at her, and I often speak to her as I would a small child, or indeed her own children. She is a good mother, I will say, though I'm preparing for when they grow up and develop their own opinions. I'll be there when that happens. My mum loves her and is still trying. My dad finds her irritating, but goes along with it for the sake of the grandchildren, whom he adores, and my mother. My sister knows this and plays this to her full advantage. My advice for anyone in this situation: do not try to change them. Do not force an apology. You already know how this goes. There is no reckoning, no dressing down. They will not see the light or change their ways. They don't care, and they won't understand. Information diet. My sister knows barely anything about my life because she is so self-obsessed that she barely asks. I withhold, however, actively. She does not deserve the privilege of knowing what goes on in my life, about how great it is going, or how hard I have worked. She will ruin it or dampen it. Learn to grey rock. Learn to ignore, to raise eyebrows, and change the subject. Therapy is a given. After all these changes, I feel so free. I set firm boundaries that she is not allowed to cross. I do not give her explanations or reasons. I don't fight her. I tell my colleagues and friends about her because she is objectively so hilarious in her ignorance and lack of empathy. Her abuse of me is no longer secret, and so she has no power left. I still get scared and anxious, but I know that I can handle her. I also know that deep down, she is empty and insecure and unhappy. I am, after a long journey, a fighter, independent, empathetic and fulfilled. Siblings of abusers, you've got this. A kid like this went to my high school. He was autistic and weird, so people generally made fun of him while others shames those making fun of him cause he was clearly different. I hated this kid from the word go. He had a cold, dead stare, and rumors circulated that he had already gotten on a sex offender list. Somehow, we ended up in a Discord server together, and this kid would constantly go on rants and raves about how he hates everyone. How his justice would be the justice that saves the world verbatim. He took a quiz on which Columbine victim are you, and he got one of the killers. Recently, he dated a petite sophomore girl and tried to coerce her into a creepy fetish by feeding her copious amounts of food to make her gain weight. The girl wouldn't break up with him out of fear. Eventually, her parents were smart enough to file a restraining order. He's also severely abusive of his younger brother and makes derogatory and horrible remarks about him and his relationship. People think I hate the kid to be a dick just because he's autistic, but I see something really sinister and disgusting about him. I truly believe he'll end up killing someone one day. Sister is a narcissist. Used to threaten me and say generally mean things when we were little. That progressed to her telling lies to get me punished as we got older, and then just being manipulative and trying to use anything to get people to feel sorry for her. My younger sisters used to get called fat and told that everybody in the family was embarrassed by them. They were 8 and 13 years younger than this sister, so she was picking on a 10 and 5-year-old when she left for college. Her parents have enabled her in doing this for years by telling us other kids that we just had to learn to ignore her comments and rarely ever reprimanding her for being a bitch. She is almost 50 years old now and still acts the same way, but we don't have to deal with her when we don't want to, but she still tries to divide the family, and she has the best luck with me since she is the oldest and more favored. I recall the time I loaned her something, and she came to me and claimed someone else broke it. I knew how this would go. She would claim that, since she didn't break it, she wasn't responsible, and her mother would agree, and dad would follow mom, and I'd be screwed out of my present that I'd just gotten a couple weeks before. So I told the superintendent at school, since it was supposedly broken at school. We got home, and she botched and complained to the parents, and when she was done dad came into my room and ripped my asshole with, "You don't go dragging our personal lives out in public, and we'll handle this stuff at home," and never took the 2 seconds to ask my side of the story, which just enforced my belief of how it was going to go. My mom then came in and told me that social life was different in high school, and I was in the wrong factum. My sociopathic older, 3.5 years, and I shared a bedroom growing up. I slept on my stomach with my head under the pillow and my stuffed animals on both sides, because she would beat me in my sleep. She would lock me in our old, dilapidated spider-infested shed instead of babysitting me. She would invite me to hang with her and her friends. All I wanted was to be included in our room. Everyone would be really nice to me for like 5 minutes before my sister would snap and beat the living shit out me, while her friends laughed. They bullied me all day, every day. I was sweeping the kitchen one afternoon and she walked in, snatched the broom out of my hands, and proceeded to beat me with it. Telephone receivers, tennis rackets, soccer cleats, and hairbrushes were her weapons of choice. Once, when I was 18, I still lived at home, and she lived a couple miles away. I just got off work and she showed up at my parents' and invited me to hang out at her place and told me to bring my weed. Knowing she was just using me, I told her I was tired and didn't want to go anywhere. She left, and about an hour later I left to get a pack of smokes. As I'm driving down my parents' street away from their house, I see my sister barreling down the street towards me. Needless to say, she plowed right into me. Totally my car. Currently my mother, my brother, his partner, his ex-wife and her husband, and my 18-year-old niece all have restraining orders against my now 44-year-old sister. She has been banned from grocery stores and other public places for her explosive, I'm just being honest, tirades on other customers. She was arrested for assaulting one of the aforementioned family members, and as the cops were putting on the cuffs on her, she said, "I should have curb stomped the beach side." Note, my dad bails her out of every legal situation she has ever been in, so she has never been held accountable for her behavior. She literally believes laws exist for other people and not her. She is a narcissistic sociopath according to all the mental health providers I have seen over the last 25 years. When we were younger, we had no heat and he would come into my room and take my covers. I was too small to fight back, so I'd just lay there and freeze all night. He'd threaten me that he'd hurt me if I told our mom. As we got older, he became a drug addict. He would steal my mom's pain medication and anxiety medication so he could get high. If my mom had any money, he'd steal it from her. He used to steal her car, but she wouldn't do anything because she didn't want him in jail. After my mom died, he broke into our house and stole several of our things. The cops said they could do nothing about it. He got all his kids taken away because he and his baby mama were doing meth while she was breastfeeding, and their baby almost died. He still says that his kids shouldn't have been taken away. He seriously doesn't understand. He actually said to my dad, "She just smoked a little bit. I don't know what the big deal is. They are about to have another baby. I hate him and want nothing to do with him. We are half siblings. Our older brother, who was his full sibling, died earlier this year and I constantly wonder why it was him and not my awful brother. I don't even consider him family anymore." In recent memory, she was getting married. Bridezilla isn't even the right word for the hell she put everyone through. Our parents are wealthy business owners and they agreed to help pay for the wedding, and they got taken for a ride. She assured them that getting a tent and having it outside would be cheaper than renting a hall. It wasn't. Parents then had to buy grass seed for the area they were getting married at. They then paid the rental fees for the tent, the tables, the chairs, the washrooms, etc. They bought all the alcohol and the wood to make the dance floor with. When they were done, it was like $20k out of their own pockets. They never got a thank you, and parents of the groom, who didn't pay for anything, treated them like shit. I got really mad about how they basically took my parents' money and ran with it like a bunch of drunk sailors, and then had the gall to say they didn't even help. They work almost every day of the week and they were footing the bill. I was really sick, won't get into it, and I needed to have surgery, but I put it off because the recovery time was going to be long and her wedding was coming up. I was also working all the time and I was in a lot of pain. She and her maid of honor got really pissed off at me for not booking enough time off work to go to their bullshit. I remember not wanting to go to the bachelorette weekend because I wasn't in very good shape. She guilt tripped me and said you probably don't even want to be in my wedding and all this crap. Just not understanding my situation or what I was saying or what was wrong with me. So I went, and I was beyond miserable in more ways than one. I could write a book about everything that happened, but it really was when my sister and my brother-in-law showed their true colors. It got ugly. They made up a bunch of crap about me and my parents being unsupportive and all this shit. She still brings it up. That was 2 years ago. We don't talk very much now.